Okay, so let's jump right in. We're going to be talking about this really fascinating and honestly pretty heated debate going on in Japan right now. The big question is, should bicycle riders who break traffic rules get fined with what they call blue tickets, just like car drivers? And believe me, this goes way beyond just traffic laws. We're talking about a real clash over freedom, safety, and how a society tries to balance the two.
I mean, think about it for a second. We've all seen it, right? A cyclist blowing through a red light, or maybe riding the wrong way down a one-way street, weaving through pedestrians with their headphones blasting. It's a common sight. But as more and more people are using bikes, the number of accidents is climbing. We've kind of hit a point where it's not just a minor annoyance anymore. It's become a serious public safety issue that people are demanding action on.
All right, to really get to the heart of this whole debate, you have to understand the system they're working with. So on one hand, you've got the red ticket. You can think of this as the nuclear option. It's a full-on criminal procedure. It's incredibly severe, and because of that, it's almost never actually used for cyclists. But on the other hand, you have the new proposal, blue tickets. These are just simple administrative fines, and that's the key difference. It's like the difference between getting a simple parking ticket versus actually getting arrested and having to go through the court system.
Okay, so first, let's look at the affirmative case, the people who are arguing for bringing in these blue tickets. If you had to boil their entire position down to just one word, it would be pragmatism. They see a clear problem on the streets, and they believe they have a realistic, practical, and immediate solution.
Now, this right here gets to the absolute core of their argument. They say the current system is totally broken, because the only tool the police have is that nuclear option, the criminal red ticket. They end up doing nothing for all the smaller, everyday violations. And what happens? Well, you get this culture where traffic rules feel more like suggestions, because everyone knows there are basically zero consequences.
So this is their game plan. It's a pretty clear, logical chain of events they're proposing. Step 1, you introduce a less severe punishment, the blue ticket. Step 2, this makes it actually practical for police to enforce the rules. Step 3, once people see the rules are being enforced, you create a real deterrent. And step 4, that deterrent changes behavior and, you hope, ultimately makes the streets safer for absolutely everyone.
And wow, this quote just sums up their whole philosophy perfectly. For the affirmative side, this isn't about punishing people just for the sake of it. It's about making the rules we already have actually mean something. If a law is on the books but it has no teeth in the real world, is it even a law? They'd say no, not really.
But of course, it's never that simple, is it? So now let's pivot and look at the counter-argument. The negative case says that this whole proposal isn't a solution at all. In fact, they argue it's a really superficial fix that completely misses the much deeper, more structural problems that are really causing this whole issue.
So right off the bat, their first move is to completely reframe the entire problem. They're saying, hold on a second, this isn't a system problem, it's an enforcement problem. The issue isn't that the red ticket is too harsh, it's that there's just no real will or maybe not enough resources to enforce any of the rules effectively. For them, the answer isn't to add another layer of fines, it's to use the tools they already have, just more intelligently.
And this is where they really start digging into what they see as the root causes. They're asking a fundamental question. Why are so many cyclists breaking the rules in the first place? And as you can see here, their answer is that, a lot of the time, it's because the infrastructure itself is a mess. We're talking about roads that are poorly designed, a serious lack of safe, dedicated bike lanes, and almost no real public education on traffic safety. So from their point of view, fining people is just punishing them for trying to get by in a system that was basically set up to fail.
And this right here is the million-dollar question from the negative side. It completely shifts the focus from the individual rider's actions to the system that they're forced to navigate. They point to places like Germany or the Netherlands, where huge investments in bike-friendly infrastructure came before they got really strict with enforcement. They argue Japan is trying to do it completely backwards.
So this brings us to what they see as the biggest risk of all, the fear of unintended consequences. If you give police the broad power to hand out on-the-spot fines for something as vague as, say, unsafe riding, couldn't that lead to enforcement that's inconsistent, subjective, and ultimately really unfair? It kind of opens the door to an arbitrary use of power, which this side argues is actually a much greater danger to society than the problem they're trying to solve.
Okay, so we've heard the arguments from both sides. We've heard the pros and the cons. And what this whole thing really boils down to, as we're about to see, is a fundamental clash of priorities. It's a deep disagreement about how a society should even begin to approach a problem like this.
And this table just lays out the conflict so perfectly. On one side, you've got the affirmative team, and they are laser-focused on efficiency and getting immediate results. Their main tool is enforcement, and their key value is rule compliance. But then, on the other side, you have the negative team. They're looking at the long game, at those big structural solutions. Their tools are things like better infrastructure and more education, and they're prioritizing values like fairness and protecting civil rights from potential government overreach.
So in this formal debate we're looking at, one side had to be named the winner. But the actual outcome and why it was the outcome tells us something really important about how we should think about and evaluate public policy in general.
And the winner was the negative side. Yeah, the judges were ultimately more convinced by the arguments against introducing blue tickets, at least for now.
So the big question is, why did they win? Well, it really came down to this. They were just more persuasive when it came to painting a picture of all the potential unintended consequences. They made a really powerful case that any new policy has to be judged not just on its intended goal, safer streets, but on all of its potential ripple effects. They managed to convince the judges that the risks of unfair enforcement and of just slapping a Band-Aid on a much deeper problem were just too big to ignore.
And the moderator left everyone with this thought right here, which is honestly the key takeaway from this whole thing. Public policy is rarely, if ever, about finding one single correct answer. It's about the messy but totally necessary process of a society weighing its competing values. What do we prioritize? Is it efficiency or is it fairness? Do we want quick fixes or are we playing the long game? And really, that brings the question right back to all of us, doesn't it? This isn't just some abstract debate happening in Japan. It's a universal conversation. Every single society has to decide for itself where to draw that line between regulating behavior for the sake of public safety and at the same time preserving individual freedom and fairness. So, how do you think we should strike that balance? It's something to think about.